Well, air pollution is just one of the issues that climate change protesters were demonstrating over in London during the last 2 weeks. Extinction Rebellion brought many parts of the capital to a standstill. Now they say they'll be back with more protests in time for Christmas. So on Friday, a tree surgeon from the Lake District scaled Big Ben dressed as Boris Johnson. Today, back home, he explained why, as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Ben Atkinson's daredevil protest was enough to make anyone watching break out in a cold sweat. For more than 3 hours on Friday, he climbed and strutted on the scaffolding around Big Ben. His costume was meant to mimic Boris Johnson, which explains the blonde wig, but not, to the best of our knowledge, the green tights. His action was fearless and possibly insane, but Mr. Atkinson is a tree surgeon with experience and a head for heights.
Danger is a relative concept. It's completely within my skill sets and experience to be able to handle movement at height. So it wasn't really a difficult climb.
Mr. Atkinson's Big Ben protest came at the end of 2 weeks of activity by Extinction Rebellion in London. More than 1,800 people were arrested. But when activists tried to disrupt the tube at Canning Town, commuters took them on, and Extinction Rebellion abruptly called a halt to its day of action targeting public transport. Now the movement is hinting at more disruption in London in the run-up to Christmas.
We need to debrief and think about what's happened and think about how to move forward. But for sure there'll be more actions between now and Christmas, and I think there will be some work around Christmas too.
Ben Atkinson was eventually arrested on suspicion of trespassing on a protected site. He faces a possible prison sentence if he's convicted.
I did this knowingly. I had sought advice before I did it. I was advised that it's very unlikely to get a custodial sentence for a non-violent action that was conducted in good faith.
But Mr. Atkinson is defiant. Even if he goes to jail, he says he'd do it again, and his involvement with the Extinction Rebellion hasn't ended. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Good evening. Shamima Begum is living in a Syrian refugee camp. Meanwhile, back here, the courts are deciding what happens to her next. She was stripped of her citizenship in Britain earlier this year, 4 years after she fled her family home in Bethnal Green to marry an ISIS fighter. The government says she has citizenship in Bangladesh because of her parents. But today, lawyers acting for the 20-year-old say that if she goes there, she could be killed. With more, here's our correspondent Simon Harris.
Shamima Begum wants to go home, but where is home? Today, that became the subject of a court case. The 20-year-old Londoner was stripped of her British citizenship after running away to join Islamic State. The government says if anywhere is home, it's Bangladesh, where her parents come from, but she insists she's still British. Shamima Begum's lawyers argue she doesn't have Bangladeshi citizenship because she hasn't applied for it. Even if she did apply, Bangladesh would turn her down because of her involvement with Islamic State. And if she tried to get into the country without permission, Bangladesh has said she'll be hanged. Miss Begum claims the British government's action has made her stateless, and that is illegal under international law. Earlier this year, she was found living in a refugee camp in Syria, where she gave birth to a baby boy, Jarrah. Her husband was a jihadi fighter.
My ideal plan is maybe to, settle down again, take care of my son, start my education again. But I don't know if I will be given that option, so I have to be open to other options, like my son being taken away, maybe me going to prison for a while.
But the following month, the little boy died, just as his brother and sister had. Miss Begum was 15 when she and 2 school friends left Bethnal Green and headed for Syria. The decision to cancel her British citizenship is being challenged at a special Immigration Appeals Commission, which will ask, has the decision made her stateless? Is she able to have a fair appeal? And is there a real risk of death or degrading treatment if she doesn't come back to London?
Sadly, she's lost 3 children. Her mental health, well-being is probably not the most strongest. And she's surrounded by individuals who are sympathetic to ISIS. So she has to be very careful about what she says.
Miss Begum's lawyers say conditions in the camp where she lives are wretched and squalid. If she loses this case, it's unclear what will happen to her.
Simon, her appeal started today, so what happens next?
Well, the Special Appeals Immigration Commission will spend the next 3 days hearing arguments about whether Shamima Begum should or shouldn't reclaim her British citizenship. There are going to be some quite complex legal discussions about Whether she does or doesn't have Bangladeshi citizenship, is she or isn't she stateless? But the Home Office is standing by its decision. It says whatever difficulties she's experienced in her life right now, it's not the fault of the Home Secretary or the government. She chose to go to Syria and she's in that camp because she defied Foreign Office advice not to go.
All right, Simon, thank you. Good evening from the Waterglade Industrial Park in Grays in Essex, where in the early hours of this morning, 39 people were found dead in the trailer of a lorry. The victims, including a teenager, were found by paramedics at 1:40 a.m. There's lots of activity here behind me right now, and in the last hour, the lorry has been taken away, and yet we don't know who they are or what country they may have come from or exactly how they died. Well, tonight, Essex Police have started a large and complex multiple murder investigation, and one man from Northern Ireland is under arrest. Our first report is from our correspondent, Simon Harris.
What happened in the back of this lorry is hard to imagine. At some time, somewhere, perhaps not even here, 39 desperate people died, trapped in a windowless metal tomb. By the time they were found, just after 1:30 this morning, it was too late.
Early indications suggest that one of these people was a teenager. The rest are believed to be adults. A murder investigation was launched and the lorry driver, a 25-year-old man from Northern Ireland, was arrested on suspicion of murder and remains in police custody.
Throughout the day, police forensic science teams worked on the lorry inside a police cordon on the Waterglade Industrial Park at Grays. The road where the lorry was parked behind those police screens is next to a disused warehouse. It's also close to the M25. And at night, it's a quiet spot, popular with truckers looking for somewhere to pull over.
It's quite trouble to find a place to park overnight, but yes, they do. They're finding some spot which is quite away from the public eyes.
You do get the lorries parked up. Obviously, they have to stop every now and then, obviously because of long distance travelling, but you do always see lorries parked up down on the side of the road all the time.
39 people in one container, fish container, it's horrible.
These CCTV pictures obtained by ITV News show the Bulgarian-registered lorry approaching the estate about 20 minutes before the alarm was raised. If this was people trafficking, local people in Grays will not be surprised.
And it happens around here anyway. So many times, so many people's been running out from the trailers and walking around everywhere. This is not the first time it happens around here.
The Prime Minister was briefed by officials as the story unfolded.
This is an unimaginable tragedy and truly heartbreaking. I know that the thoughts and prayers of all members are with those who lost their lives and their loved ones.
For the police, there is now the grimmest of tasks, removing the bodies of the victims.
The lorry and the trailer will be moved to a secure location at Tilbury Docks so the bodies can be recovered whilst preserving the dignity of the victims. We're yet to identify them and must manage this sensitively with their families.
At some point in recent days, 39 people set out on a journey. Wherever and however they hoped that journey would end, it was surely never like this.
Well, in the last couple of hours, police have said more about where the container came from. The trailer carrying 39 people travelled from Zeebrugge in Belgium and arrived into Purfleet in Essex at 12:30 a.m. Well, Simon Harris is with me now. Simon, it's been a confusing picture today, hasn't it, as police try to piece together what's happened here?
Yes, so what's emerged is that the lorry appeared to come together in two parts. Imagine the front part where the driver sits, it's called the tractor unit. The police think that came into England via North Wales on a ferry from Ireland, either from the south of Ireland or from Belfast. The back of it, the container which had the victims in it, came into England via Zeebrugge, somehow ended up here in Thurrock, also came through Purfleet. Police crucially need to see CCTV footage all along that route to try to trace it. And finally, as you said earlier, we now know that police have arrested a 25-year-old man from Northern Ireland on suspicion of murder. He's understood to be called Mo Robinson.
All right, Simon, for now, thank you. Let's return to our main story this evening. That is that 39 people, including a teenager, have been found dead in a lorry trailer here in Grays in Essex. If you're concerned about friends or relatives, the number for information is on the screen now. Our correspondent Simon Harris has been following all of today's developments. So Simon, What will be the priorities for the police over the next 24 hours?
Two priorities really. The first, obviously, and the saddest, is to get the bodies out of that lorry, to try to identify them, try to trace their families and break the very sad news to them of what's happened. Then to carry out post-mortem examinations to try to find out exactly how they died. The other priority is to try as best as possible to work out the route of that lorry. Where did it travel to from Zeebrugge and whereabouts it came into the UK and to here.
All right, Simon, thank you.
Good evening. It isn't one of the biggest ports on our coastline, but that might be precisely why it was used to smuggle 39 people into the UK. The National Crime Agency has warned ports like Purfleet are seen as soft targets for criminal networks because there are less rigorous checks. We now know the bodies found in the back of a lorry in Grays yesterday were all Chinese nationals. With all the latest on this fast-moving investigation, here's our correspondent Simon Harris.
Somewhere beyond the security gates, hidden from view inside the port of Tilbury, police began the delicate task of identifying the victims of a mass murder. The 8 women and 31 men are said to be Chinese. It's a case which has echoes of a similar tragedy involving Chinese migrants in 2000, when 58 bodies were found in Dover. Bobby Chan, an immigration caseworker in London's Chinese community, helped identify some of those victims.
I'm saddened that, they have done the same thing again. They should have known that, never go into a lorry, refrigerated lorry like this one and, die a horrible death.
A few miles upstream from Tilbury, cargo trucks poured in and out of the dockyard at Purfleet. This is where the latest victims came ashore, perhaps already dead, but they passed through the port undetected. There have been warnings before that Purfleet is a soft touch for people smugglers.
In 2016, Europol, the EU's law enforcement agency, identified Purfleet as a hotspot for migrant smuggling. And the same year, weaknesses at Purfleet were also highlighted in a report into the work of the border agency.
The docks handle around 250,000 trucks every year. The port's owners declined to comment today, but one former deputy head of the UK border agency defended the checks and searches.
There are thousands upon thousands of containers, sealed units being delivered there, and unless there is intelligence, it's very difficult for the customs and border officials to do any forms of checks on those goods. You can't search the border, there's no time or ability.
Yesterday evening, the lorry with the victims' bodies still inside was moved from Grays, where they were discovered, to the secure site at Tilbury Docks. One modern slavery helpline says it's noticed an increase in the number of Chinese migrants being smuggled into the UK.
In 2018, we had over 100 Chinese nationals reported to the helpline, which represented a 51% increase from 2017. So it is one of the more common nationalities, at least that are being reported to the helpline.
People smuggling is fueled by desperation and money. Migrants desperate for a new life, smugglers happy to exploit the vulnerable for cash.
This is an utterly horrific crime, with people, frankly, not giving a damn about the welfare, the lives of those that they smuggle, as if it's some sort of commodity.
Tonight, Essex police were given another 24 hours to question the driver of the lorry. He's believed to be Mo Robinson, a 25-year-old man from Northern Ireland who was arrested on suspicion of murder. Simon Harris, ITV News, Purfleet.